So God, here we are with all of our stories and pain and joy and interactions and the hopes that we carry and the fears that we have. They're all there. And I pray that we would be able to enter in with each other and with you in a way that is just light and honest and good, and that there would be no fear, and that we would just explore together who you are, where you're bringing us, and where you're taking us. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, I was talking with a staff person today for one-on-one, and we were talking about prayer, and she's like, "Yeah, we don't really start many meetings with prayer or end meetings with prayer." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's probably because we're all triggered by that." But then, I'm like, "But it's not a terrible thing to do." So anyway, um, that's all part of it too, right? Okay, so here's scenario number one. I'm going to tell you the scenario, and then I'm going to ask you to reflect on it with me, okay? So it's about a year and a half ago. I think it's Thanksgiving. We're at Mary's family's house, and my father-in-law, who passed about a year and a half ago. So I get this might have been 2 years ago. It was about 6 months before he died. But my father-in-law, Jim, his name was. I love him so much. He loved me, and we just probably couldn't have been two Christians that saw things more differently. And he just loved to debate. And I'm not much of a debater. I like to talk, but I get all bristly with debate. But anyway, so, he had been following our church and our our thoughts around LGBTQ stuff. And that bothered him so much. He just couldn't stand it, really. And it wasn't that he didn't, like, love me or affirm of me, but he just felt so afraid for us, like, I could just see the fear in his eyes. And so this one thing, I think it was Thanksgiving, he came up to me, and he had his Bible out. Oh no, he had his Bible out, and he's like, "No." And he had this great voice, you guys, just this, Steve-O, he would talk like that. But he said, "Now, regarding the homosexuals, and we had this conversation a bunch. It never went very well. And, we have some kids in our extended family who are queer and stuff. And some of them are in the room. And, I'm just like, oh, we're not having this conversation right here. So I just remember saying, stop. I do not want to have this conversation right now. I do not. And he got kind of confused by that. And so he kept, and I got angry, and I was like, "Jim, we are not having this conversation right now." And pretty soon, like, everyone, there's maybe 12 or 15 of us, and some of the sisters are coming over to break us up, kind of, and say, "Okay, Steve, it's okay," or, "Jim, let's stop." And we just kind of, like, and we never returned to that conversation. Um, and here's my question, and it's going to require some thought. You guys are going to have to chime in. What could I have done differently? If I could have done anything differently, what are some ideas for you, me, when we find ourselves in these situations where there doesn't seem to be a great way in or out? And there's no right or wrong answers here. Let's just talk together. But what are some options that I have and you have when we find ourselves in those kind of situations? What can we do?
Punt.
Well, that's what I did
Oh
basically,
my
Jim.
God.
I 100% punted.
You
And I
stiff
think
arm. No, it might have been a stiff arm
it might
as
have
a
been a stiff arm. Yeah. Yeah.
but yikes. Oh.
But I mean, let's really, and there's gonna be some, I'm gonna share some other scenarios too. We're not trying to camp out here for the whole night, but okay, so punting but literally what would that look like to, using the metaphor all the way down to punt?
Well, you could say, can we talk about this at coffee at a different time? You know,
Yes.
in a more one-on-one situation.
Yes.
That's always a good option. But you would have to be committed to say Thursday at 6 o'clock,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
own that at that point.
Right. No, that's a great point, Steve. And I actually really like that. I think, sorry, I probably will reflect on every answer, but just that's my way. But yes, to take it out of, because I think I didn't feel comfortable having the conversation in front of everybody, including
Yeah.
some of my queer, nieces and stuff. And if I can prepare a little bit for that conversation with him, because he's prepared, I don't like being surprised by that, but then you're totally right. If you offer that, then you have to follow up with it. You can't just be like, well, let's get together sometime. But I like that. What are some other thoughts, ideas, comments?
The other thought I have is, why would you continue to have a conversation? You've already been there. You've already
Yep.
done that. You've
Yep.
heard each other.
Yep.
You don't agree. That's
Yep.
okay.
Yeah.
It is so okay.
Yep.
And when someone attacks me, I've got the right to say no. I've got
Yep.
the right to put a boundary down. Don't care who they are in the family tree,
Yep.
because that's not okay, and that's theirs.
And I'll reflect on that too. I think part of the reason why I did that was just in an intuitive sense that we're just not anywhere close to understanding each other. And the other thing is, like, and maybe this is unfair, and I don't want to speak ill, because again, he loved me so much, and I know that right down to the ground. I mean, he loved me and supported me so much. But I don't think he was interested in hearing what I thought. I think he was interested in telling me what he thought. And that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Other thoughts, ideas?
I think just like in terms of a skill of like needing to say a hard thing to someone or a boundary like that, like even starting it with like hey, I appreciate how much this matters to you, or starting with some sort of like, I see you, I validate whatever could be true for you in the moment, and I am not able to have this conversation right now. But I think when it's led with something towards that person, I think that's just able to be received better often.
Yeah.
When that person feels like somehow seen or heard.
Mm-hmm.
And then the no is still the no, because your boundary is still your boundary. But
yeah, I like that, Rebecca. There's this, I think of this strategy I heard one time. It's a yes, no, yes. Yes, I hear your question. Yes, it's important. Yes, I see that you care about this a lot and you care about me. No, I'm not ready to talk about it. I'm not comfortable talking about it here or ever. And then yes, reminding you're important to me. You're but that can be a way of valuing relationship, which I do and did with him. I mean, so much, but also holding a boundary. It's interesting even to think about this. I remember my amygdala was just firing so hardcore in that moment. Like, I was just, it was, I wasn't, it was fight or flight or freeze. I wasn't freezing and I wasn't running. I was going to fight. Well, I don't know what I was. Maybe that was a freeze, I guess. I wasn't fighting. I just was trying to put up a boundary.
I don't know if you were doing this intentionally, Steve, but I feel like the way I hear the story told is that you were fighting for the people in the room that really was not fair for them to be bystander to those opinions when the conversation was between you and your father-in-law and these other people who small parts of their story were sensitive to that conversation. I think the way that you shut it down was the way it needed to be shut down, and then maybe the follow-up that Rebecca offered, like, this is a conversation between the two of us that I don't want to have.
Ever.
I know, right? Well, I mean, that's a good perspective. And I think that's probably unconsciously what I was doing, maybe, in addition to my own sense of not wanting to talk about it. But, it's interesting just to get one layer out when you're relationally involved, this is family, and your amygdala's firing, maybe because you're tired, it was a long day, and you feel like you've already had this conversation a million times. It's really hard to be rational and thoughtful in these situations, And so I wonder if it's sometimes more about returning to, versus getting it right in the moment. I don't know how many times we're going to get it right in that moment. That's probably not the point,
It's different if you're asked to be part of a conversation versus choose your adjective for how it came at you.
Yeah.
And my wondering, and Steve and I were just wondering, maybe in that setting, the other people, it was intended for the other people to hear as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're at a social gathering, that's not something you bring up, generally speaking, in a loud voice. You just don't. Unless you want everybody to hear without directly saying it to everybody.
Right. I see what you're saying.
Possible.
That's very possible. That's what was happening. Yeah.
I think if nothing else too, like being on that side of like kind of being hijacked conversationally, like I'd like to think like I wouldn't do that to someone. But I suppose in different ways we found ourselves hijacking someone else. And so if nothing else, even it's a reminder of like how that feels, and to not do that to others, to like ask to have a conversation, or, not just like, maybe we wouldn't show up exactly like that, but there are other ways we could hijack someone with a hard thing and not give them a chance to kind of like have a choice to have the conversation or be prepared or whatever. So, being on that side of it could just also just be a learning opportunity of what like I wouldn't want to do to others,
Yeah. Yes. I think that kind of awareness is good too, right, Rebecca? I mean, like, because we have to look at that, it's probably not going to be as harsh as that, but we can subtly do that, I think. Hijack. Okay, I'm thinking of another scenario, but any other comments or thoughts?
I want to extend the question a little bit farther.
Okay, great.
What if the scenario had got, so in wherever you were, the both of you could have chosen to leave the conversation. What about when the conversation is happening and you're stuck? Like it's where you live, or it's where both of you live.
Yeah.
And it's like not diffusing. How would you like have that? This person wants to have this conversation and you're saying no. What would you have done then?
I think about, and I want to hear what anyone else said. I do have a thought immediately here. I remember, so one of the podcasts I listen to is Armchair Expert by Dax Shepard. It's just half the time, it's just hilarious. He interviews all these people, but Dax is a recovering addict, and he has just learned to be very honest about where he's at and how to access his feelings and emotions. And so he tells a story about what he does in that situation, Michelle. Like let's say he's in that kind of a place with his wife, Kristen, and Kristen is coming after him and he's feeling trapped. He's learned that he goes, he has to exit the room and he just say, hey, I need about 15 minutes by myself to figure out why I'm feeling so triggered right now. And then maybe I'll come back in about 15 minutes and be in a better place to have this conversation. Now, maybe I won't, and then he goes back and he goes, I've figured out when I feel triggered or trapped or stuck, one of four things is probably happening. Like one of four fear things is going on. Now that's his work. We all have to do our work. But I think when we feel trapped in a conversation and we don't want to be there, we have to recognize that we're being triggered. And I don't think it helps to just stay there and try to shovel our way out of it. I do think it's okay to set up that boundary and say, hey, even though this sounds, no, I mean, and even though this is really important to you, I can't have this conversation right now. And I remember early in our marriage, I'm so much more of an out loud processor. Big surprise, right? Mary's a internal processor, right? Well, that's a recipe for a nightmare, especially when you're just married. And there was times where I just would be trying to pull stuff out of her, and I would just go, and come on, we have to have this conversation now. And after a while, she'd be like, I have a headache. I have to go, I think that was her. So anyway, my point is it's really okay to get a little space. I don't think it's okay for someone to hold you hostage in a conversation that you aren't ready to have, so I just rambled for 5 minutes, Michelle. Is that even close to an answer to that question?
Sure. Yes.
Joan, we can't hear you. There we go.
Picking up.
They may be really long walks, but do it on a walk outside your house and hold hands, even if you don't want to hold hands. Because when you're the verbal processor with the not verbal processor, it helps.
Really long walks. sometimes.
Really long walks.
I co-sign that. It's easier to
Yeah.
talk when you're walking.
Yeah,
Co-sign.
because you're looking forward. And it was something Chris, I think it was Chris Fossum. She said the visual was the problem's in front of you. You're a team, shoulder to shoulder. And it's not between you, it's in front of you. And you're looking at it together. And I've always appreciated that.
Yeah.
I've heard that the movement of walking is helping activate right and left side brain,
Yeah.
which just gets you
Ooh.
more like
Yep.
your brain online in a way that's helps process things.
Cool.
I think you're right. And even, or if you can't walk, tapping like that, can activate both sides of your brain in a way that's, I don't know how the brain science works, but yeah. I love that. Thanks for asking that question. I think there's no one that's going to drive us more crazy than the people that we live with. No matter how much we love each other, like each other. And yeah, we got to find ways to be with each other and walk all the way through it, yeah. So what other thoughts, comments, questions, either about that scenario, maybe you want to take it further?
How did it end? I mean, there you are saying stopped it. Was there an elephant in the room
Yeah.
and that was over?
Well, so one of the things that happened is I went over and talked to my mother-in-law, his wife, and she was just crying, because she's seen that kind of scenario happen a lot. And, so I was talking to her a little bit and, but it just kind of, there was an elephant in the room. It kind of just dissipated. It wasn't like the group had a moment where we said, okay, that was hard. Okay, that was awkward. I think it just kind of dissipated and we kind of pretended it didn't happen, even though it was such a huge, moment. But also like, I don't remember anyone like reaching out to me or, maybe they did, but I don't remember that, you know, like, hey, how was that? Mary and I talked about it for sure, but
Well, the cool part is you loved him and he loved
yeah,
you. I suspect everybody in the room knew that.
they did 100%.
So, and I think you know, that to me, just knowing that, you know, there'd be compassion for you. And even, you know, I think it's cool. Again, you could throw your arms around him because you did love him, and you could say, hey, Dad, you ask me the hardest stuff sometimes, but right now, honestly, I just want you to know I love you, man.
Yeah.
And you could say it and actually mean it,
Yeah.
and just say, I mean, that's the best part, because you could put your arms out. You know, when people do that to me, I'm not real good at putting my arms around them. But the fact that you could, I think that was the best thing you could have ever done. That said a lot without saying anything, so that if you did put your arms around him and just say, gosh, you drive me crazy, but I love you. And everybody would say, I mean, anyway, interesting that you got mad. I get mad too. When people do that, oh my gosh, do I get mad?
Yeah.
I have to step out. I've been told, Jim, you better step out, man, because you're not going to do well otherwise. And listen to me say, throw your arms around. I'm like, oh, but I think it's cool that you did love your dad and he loved you despite your differences.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks. It's so complicated, you know,
Oh,
especially in theology was just so important to him, and orthodoxy, and, you know, and I respected that. I mean, he, you know, we came to the different conclusions, some different conclusions, but he also, like, I realized over the years, like, the way he felt connected and loved was to spar, you know. But I just have never, I like talking. I don't like sparring. I just don't, that's just really hard for me to do, actually, you know. It takes a lot of energy and I don't enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't either.
So
yeah.
Okay, so let me ask, before I go to the next scenario, when I share that kind of story, and as we're talking about it, what does it make you, does it bring up any memories or thoughts, or like what is it, I don't know what the question is here. What does it make you want to reflect on or learn or take a next step on?
Learn how to take a punch. I mean, I say that in good sense. Once I went to one class on boxing. Oh my gosh. But anyway, well, a couple classes, but in the first thing he taught you was how to take a punch. Be comfortable with it. Yeah. I mean, if you go to get hit with the gloves on, you don't extend your gloves that way. You kind of take it back and go with it. Me, I see a punch coming, I'm lunging into with my counter. So I learn how to take a punch, you know.
Well,
and not
I hear you say, like, learn the flow of energy in a way that doesn't, you know, exhaust you after one moment, right? I mean, that's what I'm hearing you say. Like, yeah.
Again, you know, I don't like sparring either. Speaking of boxing, but my point is, like, I got to learn to, what you're saying, go with the flow. Let it, you know, you can take it and absorb it in a sense and learn how to take it. Otherwise, he taught us all this good stuff, and then we got to box him, and I went at him with everything. In about 5 seconds, I was out of gas. He didn't even have to throw a punch. He blew on me and I fell over. So anyway, my point is to learn how to take a punch and not extend. That is such a discipline.
Yeah.
So learn how to take that and not I don't know, not give him an uppercut.
No, I like that. Not expend all your energy, but actually go with it and have the ability to withstand and maybe walk away, maybe keep going. I like that, Jim.
It's hard. It takes discipline, great discipline,
Yeah.
and control. In a sense, control. Yeah, but anyway, I think the greatest thing was, Bub, he loved you, and that speaks volumes. Some people, I could probably give you a good answer, but if my actions didn't support it, what good is that answer? I like that your actions said things, and maybe you like what you did, maybe you didn't. It's a tough one, but I think the fact that you could be that way with him, you knew how to go with the flow, in a good sense of the word.
Yeah. Who else? Any sort of reactions, reflections, like take it one step further? What does it make you think? What does it make you want?
Something that I've been trying to do a better job of is like trying to understand things from the other person's point of view and what is like their macro level communication that's behind whatever they're coming at you with. And like I get like super defensive and I get super detailed with things, especially like in argument situations where the person is like, hey, you know, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, actually it was W, X, Y, not X, Y, Z. But that's not the point of the communication, right? The point of the communication is, you know, something else. So like if your father-in-law loved to spar, right? Like maybe the communication wasn't that he wanted to talk theology. Maybe his communication was, hey, Steve, I really like the back and forth with you. And like trying to think about like what's this macro level communication before I respond. Because like as you were talking about like your response, like I don't know if it was a literal or figurative like
literal.
hand
Literal.
that you were giving. So yeah, so either way, like I mean, I think all of us like have had instances where it's literal or figurative like hand like that, right? But I think for myself, okay, and I've talked about this like with our kids because like I'm working on it myself and I see it in our kids. What's the macro communication that's trying to go on here? What's the other person's point of view? And that's what we're talking about, like to some extent with inclusivity, right? Like what is this other person's point of view? And then how can that change how I respond? And like in that moment, like it's super difficult, right? Like, but you know, that higher level communication for me is just very helpful with, you know, how I'm able to respond back to that person, trying to do it in a, you know, loving and kind way.
I really like that, Todd. In a way, it's detaching from your feelings about what's happening and trying to get at, you know, observing the person, observing what's happening beyond just the felt moment. I really like that, the macro level. Are there certain questions that you've learned to ask? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Todd, but are there certain questions you've learned to ask that try to get at that, or is it more of an internal thing?
No, I'm very internal with this stuff, and if I speak too quickly, then like pretty much the stuff that comes out of my mouth is pretty much all defense and whatnot. So as part of my process, hopefully I can get to a point where I can ask some more of these things. But basically, it's like don't concentrate on the detail of what they're saying. Like try to step past that. What is, you know, what's the level up from that? Like basically that's just what I, you know, try and think about in my head is like, don't concentrate on the detail. What's the emotion that's being communicated here? Is, you know, I'm pretty early on in this, so I'm no expert by any means. But it's just something that helps me a lot when I'm able to detach myself and do that. Like you said, Steve, yeah, it's that detachment, right? Because like when I'm right in it, then yeah, I want to fight. Like I don't want to. I've got this, you know, I mean, grew up fundamentalist, evangelical Christian, right? I don't want to be wrong. Whether I think there's some personality type in there too. I don't want to be wrong, or I don't want to be bad. So if there's a small thing that the detail is wrong on, well, actually this or that, you know, but that, you know, takes away so much from like what the other person's actually trying to communicate to you. yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question there. Going
No, I
stream of
think you
consciousness here.
no, I think you did, Todd. Partly the reason why I think you're right is if you tried to ask questions to get at the macro level, most of the time the person isn't even aware, right? You know, they're not even aware of it. So there's no way that you could ask them. It is mostly just detaching from the feeling of the moment and what's kind of coming at you. And frankly, that's why any practice of breathing and meditation that you might do in the mornings or at night or whatever, that teaches you detachment by doing it, you know, because what you're doing over and over again is you breathe in, you breathe out, you breathe in, you breathe out. You're going to Target later. You got to pick up. Oh crap! Okay, no, I'm meditating right now. You know, so like you're actually training yourself to come back to every time you think about the Kleenex you have to get at Target, or the haircut you have to reschedule, or that's all great training to return, detach from that interruption and go back to the breath. That's why meditation is so important, because it teaches us what you're talking about, Todd. And you know, the more we can do that, the better we can not get so triggered in that moment. You know, meditation isn't to get some Zen like, in my opinion, and I'm certainly no expert, but to get some Zen like experience while you're meditating. It's to learn that you're not your feelings, you're not your situation, you're not your feeling in the moment is not the totality of your experience. It's going to come and go. It's going to ebb and flow, you know, and the something that's in you, the reality, the centeredness that's in you is bigger than that. So that's why we meditate. And when's the last time I meditated though? It was months ago. So I need to need to practice what I preach. Andy, Linda, anything you want to add on this one? Or Enoch? You don't have to.
I've been trying to formulate my thoughts. Clearly not doing a good job listening. So I think like, so I had a arguably more explosive experience over Christmas with my wife's mom's husband, not stepfather, because that's too close. But anyway, I won't go into all that, but he, like, at least the feeling that I get from it, like reflecting on it now, is that like the stuff that we were straight up like yelling at each other over, it was like he had this moral high ground and I was clearly down here. And so, you know, he needed to make sure that I knew how low I was and that I was, you know, in the wrong, which then just got me super defensive. And I wanted to, you know, shout clap at him, which I did. But then it was just like, you know, it was like the worst possible conversation, if you can say that, because like I was reacting to a whole bunch of stuff. But I think to go back of like this, I see in myself like this, how dare you think you know better than me on some nonsensical issue that I think you're just spouting nonsense on. And like, when it comes down to it, it's probably opinion. I'd argue it's not. But I think, you know, in this, at least in my scenario, I was reacting to what, you think you're better? You think you know stuff? Like,
yeah.
So I think kind of to tie back to what you're saying, like being able to detach from the emotion for a moment and like recognize the emotion, be like, oh, this has me very fired up. But then to say like, okay, like I can think in this moment too, versus, you know, emote all over the room. So
yeah. It's so hard when you feel like, Andy, when you feel like someone's condescending, you know,
yeah,
to you.
Yep.
That's very, for me, to detach from that is very hard.
Yeah.
So I hear you on that one. Whew. I like the term shout clapping on that too.
Oh man, if you like to tell the story, it's hilarious. Like I'm not gonna do it now because holy cow, but oh my gosh, it's so funny. Ugh.
Okay, no pressure. But Linda, Enoch, anything you want to add? Really, honestly, no pressure. You just pass. Pass if you got nothing.
No, I was just going to, I guess I don't have really anything to add to it, but some of the things that were said did remind me of conversations I've had, and some of them fairly recently. And I have a great relationship with my adult son, and he's the one who likes to, I mean, he loves to discuss things. He likes to really get into it, and he likes to debate from time to time. But there was a conversation we had quite a few weeks ago, but we got to a point where I knew that I was getting triggered by some things. And I just said, let's, I need to stop on this right now. And, we can come back. And I knew what he was going to say because we've had the discussion before. And he was not ready to stop. And as he kept going on, I started getting really teary. And we got to the end of the conversation. This was a video call and stuff. I think he realized what was going on. But what we were able to actually do was come back and have a separate conversation after that conversation and just and I just said, there are times that I know I'm getting triggered, and he understands what the triggers are. He recognized that he had gone too far, and we were able just to come to an agreement that there are some times that we can talk and he can go on, and other times we just need to kind of pause and just not now. And that has worked out really well. And I really respected the fact that he did come back and he did apologize, and we were able to talk about it more. So.
Oh, I'm glad that you had the wisdom to, shut it down. And then it sounds like being able to come back was really important.
Mm-hmm.
Loved ones, man. Whew. It's hard.
It's hard.
Enoch, just wondering if you got anything back there. You're good. Okay. All right. Should we do one more scenario? We up for that? Maybe another 15 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, this one, I don't know if this one's gonna work. Okay, cool, Andy. Gotcha. Andy's got to step away for a moment. Hopefully you jump back in. Let's say that you are at Target with your kids. Let's say your kids are little, and some of us need to remember when our kids were little. Some of us don't need to remember at all. It's happening right now. And there is a woman with a hijab. She's fully covered. And your kid looks, and you can tell she or he is really interested. And later on in the car says, "Mom, Dad, why was that woman dressed like that?" What do you say?
Well, nice that it's in the car.
Yeah, versus right there. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we have some moments where one of our kids blurted out some stuff that right in this dentist office that was just horrifying, and just completely 4-year-old. I won't even say it, but like, "Oh, kill me now." But yeah, so okay, we're in the car. It's safe. Your kid is just wondering why was that woman dressed like that?
If you haven't understood culture, you can talk about what you know, and that just ask, not to ask, but also say, that's cool that you're asking. Yeah. And let me tell you what I know or why. And then you also say, well, why'd you ask? I mean, I got a buddy, and he has his grandkids, and he's really enjoying. And they'll say something. He'll say, "Well, why is that?" And the little guy says, "It's a mystery." This is a 4-year-old saying it's a mystery, and it's a great answer. But I think it'd be interesting to hear. I mean, you answer, but you also say, "So tell me why you're
Yeah.
asking," because they could, what they have to say is unbelievable.
I love responding and finding out about the curiosity of a young kid's question. I think you're totally right with that.
Art Linkletter is. I'm dating myself. He was the best.
Art Linkletter.
You talk about going with the flow, and the response the kids had was like so smart or so other, and you would just say like, man, I'd never think of that, and that answer's great. Just like this little guy saying it's a mystery.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. I think it's cool that they're asking you to say what you could that you thought explained it as best or what your understanding was, but just again say, so why do you ask?
That's great. And kids are so great. When we were back at Sabas worshiping, I think because the way the stage was sort of high up and everyone could see, a lot more kids would respond to the all play questions. And one time I asked a question like, hey, what does your family like to do just, when you're just hanging out on a Saturday? And some like 5-year-old goes, drink beer. And I mean, I literally fell down on the stage. I actually fell down laughing because it was just so funny. And their parents were just mortified, but it was so awesome. Kids say the darndest things. Okay, so other thoughts, comments?
I actually had lots of conversations like that with my son
Yeah.
because he was very curious, and he has always been very verbal. So and he's he likes to process externally, where I'm very much different from that. But there were a lot of occasions where we ran across something like that, and he would ask, and I would answer the best I could. And if there were additional things that he had questions about, we would look it up together, and we would try to find the answers together.
That's
And
great.
I mean, he is now a scientist, and I mean, it started early, but it was from a very early age. He was very interested in a lot of things.
Linda, I wonder if your willingness to say, "Oh, I'm not totally sure. Let's look it up together," is part of what put him on the path to being a scientist. I bet it is.
It may
That's
play
so
in there somewhere.
great. That's so wonderful.
Mhm.
What else? Why is that woman dressed that way?
I think one thing I think about is when I was a kid, and this isn't about like saying something ill of my parents, but I felt like, and maybe it was just that time too. I don't know. I feel like there was a whole lot of like, don't look, don't point, don't observe that, don't whatever. And so I think even for me, trying now as a parent to just honor their curiosity, like,
Yeah.
because like there's still that thing in me that almost wants to be like, even if it was in the car, maybe not if it was in the car, but certainly maybe if it was in the store, even if the person couldn't hear, that kind of wants to shush and whatever. And I have to stop myself and like just honor the curiosity. And I, with my oldest Hannah, I had a couple moments in a store where she asked about someone what felt like loudly, who knows if the person actually heard. And I did kind of shush her. And I have regret about that. And it's less about the regret, but now trying to do better in terms of like the curiosity could lead to like a beautiful discovery about the world and like learning more about other people and how other people live and whatever. So yeah, just trying to lean into and honor the curiosity, regardless of the answer, if I even have the answer or not.
Yeah.
But just, yeah, you did notice that. Like, that's cool. Huh? What did you think of it? And like being a learner, having a learner attitude rather than don't look, don't touch, don't point, don't.
Yeah, don't embarrass me, you know,
Right?
essentially. You know, apparently when I was a little kid, uh, with my older sister, I think I was 4, and for some reason, both of us just started yelling the F word super loud, just over and over again. F, 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 F. And my mom said that she just, now this is the 70s, okay? But she just left. She just left the store and then came back, you know, but she just, as a 26-year-old or whatever she was, 28, she just needed to leave. Needed to leave those foul-mouthed kids. Don't embarrass me. Andy, in case you don't have the question is your little kids, you're in Target or wherever, and there's a woman that's fully covered, she's wearing a hijab, and later on your kids ask you, hey, why is she wearing that? Why, I don't get that. Why is she dressed like that? What would you say? I'm not asking you, I'm just getting you up to speed, Andy. You certainly know.
I'm gonna say it's a lot of pressure to come back to.
Yeah, no. That's
Where'd
just
it go?
I'll teach you to leave, Andy.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'll never do it again.
No, just that's the question we're all pondering.
Gotcha.
I think I mean, I try to be obviously as honest as I can with them, but I try to normalize whatever they're wondering is, because that's normal. Like,
Yeah.
and
Normal to wonder.
normal to want, well, but like normal to see a woman in a hijab, like,
Yeah.
And even like sometimes, wasn't that really pretty fabric? Or
Oh, yeah.
But just to try and get them thinking about, oh yeah, that is a different culture. So people that from that culture dress like that. People from our culture dress like this, which seems silly to think, but and then like, yeah, and we're still God's beautiful creation, and like,
And then Google Daniel Tiger hijab.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and to Linda's, sorry, did I interrupt someone? To Linda's point, you know, nothing wrong with saying, you know, what a great question. Let's look that up, you know, and let's.
The only 2 books I checked out at the library today were Enoch's book that was on hold and a book about slavery, because we are all about talking about how we hate people with black skin right now at our house. And I'm like, what? I didn't elicit this conversation, or have I said that out loud or given you any reaction? Clearly some reaction. So I was like, well, let's start somewhere. Let's get a book.
That is so great though, because Michelle, the alternative is you shut that down. We don't talk like that. We
No.
don't do that. We don't, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, now there's shame in the conversation, and you know, whereas, oh, well, that's okay, let's start somewhere. Let's start with history. Let's start. This was really smart of you.
Well, because we're talking about history, so it was coming up anyways. But I said to her, I was like, well, I've had really good friends who have a different color skin than me. And she said, what's their name? And I was like, I don't have any right now. I was like, I'm not even helpful in this conversation. It just is, which felt shameful. I was like, oh, we need to put ourselves in more situations. And I was like, no, that's gross too, Michelle. So I shut all kinds of things down in that conversation that I could have explored more. But
and you went and got a book, and you know, furthered the conversation. You didn't, so you just really, in my opinion, handled that really well. And of course, you know, if the goal is perfection, then let's quit right now, you know. But if the goal is learning and processing, and then you did it really well. I don't think I would have thought that. In fact, I mean, my moment that I referred to in the dentist's office, a black family walked in, and one of our kids, who was 4, but pointed and said, "They are dark. I don't like them." And you know, you're 4, and he was scared for some reason. But then you feel shame because like, oh no, we have such a white culture in our circle of friends that's reality. So there's just that opens up a lot of layers, doesn't it?
Oh,
Of
layers.
shame. So and we gotta give ourselves a little compassion because shame doesn't go anywhere good. Guilt can go somewhere good. Like, hey, I've made a mistake. I can change that. But shame doesn't take me anywhere good. Just buckles it down. So,
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to consider, Todd, your picture of the
Yeah.
macro level of like when you say that, Lorelai, my whole body like tenses up. I just in my head, I'm like, I hate that you're saying that. But then like on the macro level, it was like, what are you actually saying?
Mhm.
Like what are you looking for me to affirm right now? Or what do you need? So when I could like remove all of the layers that I was like thinking through, like there's not even a Black person on our street or in our neighborhood that I know of that has kids, or whatever. So like I shut all that on pause. I put it on pause and dealt with it myself, those things later. But in the moment was like, what are you looking for when you say that? So I haven't arrived at an answer yet, but I removed my emotions from my response.
There you go. And I think you're right, Todd. Thanks for that gift of detaching and trying to figure out the macro. Because and you're right, Michelle, even kids that especially maybe kids, like they're not aware of the macro, but typically what you're hearing is not the macro. You're hearing the moment. So, man.
Your question, Steve, reminds me years ago. I was, it was the first time we were leaving Pittsburgh and we were going to drive to Ocean City, New Jersey. It was like going to, I don't know. It was just, we always went to Lake Erie. It was like an hour north of Pittsburgh. But this time we were going somewhere, man. We're going to Jersey. It seemed like it was like the moon. We're driving. And as we were going along, for the first time, I see, we got off to get gas or something. I see Amish people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this. And I'm going, Dad, we got to say something. And my dad's like, I go, Dad, pull over. Let's talk to him. And I'll tell you, he did. I'm glad he did. We pulled over. No, I'm surprised my dad did. Because if you know my dad, anyway, he pulls over and he just asked him a question like, hey, we're trying to go down to this road. Can you tell us how to get down there? And I was like, I didn't say a word. I was just like at the window, like listening to them, like watching them. This kid's watching, there's this Amish kid watching me. I'm watching him. But what was cool is, he was learning about me as I was learning about him, and in a sense, and I'm really glad I did it because, it made me wonder all the more. And I wasn't afraid of stopping. My dad was, oh, we don't do that or whatever. It would have caused me to say, I wonder why my dad did that. I guess we shouldn't do that. Or anyway, I'm glad we stopped. And so when you see somebody that's a little bit different from you.
I think, Jim, that's remarkable that your dad stopped. Number one, typically we don't like to take orders from our kids. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and we're going to Jersey,
where
man.
we're going.
We ain't stopping for nothing.
We're not even going to stop to pee. But he did stop. That's pretty remarkable. And
I remember it.
It was probably maybe uncomfortable for him. I don't know. Maybe, but he normalized something there for you you remember it. Wow.
What helped me years later, my son said, hey, come to Chicago, get on a train. This was just 4 or 5 years ago. His dad, it's so unique. You get on that train, it's really amazing. People sitting next to you. And we took the train down to Chicago, Holly and I. And as we got down in lower Wisconsin, the train wasn't very crowded until I forget, down in the lower part of Wisconsin, about 40 Amish people come pouring onto the train, and they just took it over. And this dude's sitting right next to me. And I'm glad Dad pulled over. It helped me to, when this Amish guy sitting next to me, I wasn't afraid of him. It was, even though I had never talked to an Amish person since that day, it was really cool. I could, like, if I wanted to talk to him, I was okay with that. But anyway, you just, it was, yeah. If you knew my dad, you'd be surprised that he pulled over too. Because normally you say, we ain't stopping for nothing. We got to get there. But we did, and I'm glad we did. It allowed my wonder to even be bigger and wonder all the more.
What a great connection. Bookends, you know. Anyone else? Well, I'm looking at the time, and I want to ask you to reflect on, before we close, what's maybe one thing you're taking away. Just one thing. So as you're thinking about that, this question that I just asked about, when your kid asks you a question about a woman wearing hijab, I heard that asked from someone, I can't remember who it was, but how they answered was really interesting. They said, oh, that's how that woman shows her love for God. And I really liked that answer. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, huh. But that's kind of a beautiful way of honoring Islam and honoring that person's dedication and reframing something. So, yeah. So what's just one thing? What's one thing you're taking away from this conversation before we close? And you can pass. You can always pass. That's fine.
I think just that last thought, like letting wonder grow, like for me, like that's huge, right? Because I feel like, for a lot of things, like as I was growing up, it's like, oh, like things got shut down pretty early, right? And you weren't allowed to let wonder grow. And like, like with the situation with somebody in a hijab, like, oh, we don't talk about that or whatever. Like if something like that gets shut down right away, then all of a sudden it becomes, oh, well, that's, them,
Right.
like
right.
it's like an us them thing, as opposed to, yeah, you learn more about it. Maybe you don't know the answers, so maybe you do look it up, but you learn and you let that wonder grow, and you find out, they're honoring God this way. There's other things in their culture, and you start to appreciate more of reasons why they did that, and appreciate the differences, as opposed to like those differences, being something that's like a negative. But yeah, if you shut that down and don't let the wonder grow, don't ask the questions, don't dig into things, then that never happens.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Let the wonder grow. I like that, Todd. That's good.
I think that when we get a chance to sit around and talk in conversations, whether it's in person or whether it's in a Zoom conversation like this, I think it is always like a supernatural experience in growing a culture. This little culture that this group has become just in this short period of time, and I'm fascinated by how it would grow if you'd keep on going. Because it takes about the amount of time that we've met to kind of get to comfortable with each other, and to start building trust and group comfort. And I think that it's fun to sit in a group and talk about hard things like that. But I think, probably if we did it 3 or 4 more weeks, the conversation would get even more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree.
Well, I think it's nice not to have all the answers and feel okay about it. I was a little bit nervous when we started. This is the first time I've stepped into an environment to talk to anybody at Genesis, and then with COVID, that was great. That certainly separated us all from me as a new person. But yeah, I do feel like I know everybody a little bit better, and I hope they know me a little bit better. But I certainly more comfortable talking with everybody than I did before we had this. But I'll say this. So I just happened to have this next to me, so I didn't plan this. But David Lee, he's the WCCO announcer. I don't. Anyway, he retired, and there was something there in the newspaper that day, and I cut it out. And anyway, they were talking about he was so good with people, and he talked with big stars and Bill Russell. Bill Russell, he just chew you up, loved to stuff the ball down people's throats. But Bill Russell, he said, "You're one of my favorite players, and why?" But anyway, he was really good getting people to get comfortable. David Lee, apparently. And then they were talking about he could talk with the big stars, but he was also said, but Lee had it says here, I just happen to have it. It says Lee had let me see if I can read it. Had the treasured conversations with those who are often overlooked, like Chuck the valet, or Harold the florist, or Giovanni the security guard. And he made the statement, he said, they just had the beat of the city. I love that statement. But some people will surprise the heck out of you if you can just hang in there long enough. And he ends it by saying, he says, they were asking like why he did all this, and he was so good at it. It seemed natural. He says, maybe it's because I'm the son of a teacher. And I always felt like the person who got to walk into a library and read every book. We were starting earlier, Steve, talking about your book, and I read the first chapter of a book, and I didn't like it. Hall says, stay with it. And by the end, I couldn't put the book down. It was just so great. I'm so glad I didn't stop in chapter 1. And I find with a lot of people that if I can just walk into the library and read their story. It's a statement that gets overused, right? Tell me your story. But if I just find it fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because they just like here with all these nice people here, listening to them and talking to them. And do we come up with any great answers? I don't know, but it was helpful. And I get to know everybody a little bit better. Anyway, I'm in page 3 of some of you guys, and look forward to more reading.
I like that, Jim. When it comes to people, don't stop with chapter 1. Whew, that's a good one. That's a mic dropper. Boom.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anyway.
Anybody else?
I think just in general, it reminds me, and for a lot of different reasons, it's been something I've been working on in my life for a long time for all manner of reasons, but like working on being a healthy communicator, like it really matters. Like learning how to be a safe person in conversation, actually like actively and intentionally learning how to be a safe and healthy communicator, like it really, really does make a difference and really, really does matter when it comes to a hard conversation or an important conversation. Like these skills are worth it, and they're worth learning more about and growing in ourselves and myself. Yeah, it's good. And I think like it matters in like our personal relationships already in our lives, but it matters like everywhere we go, from when we're at Target and that weirdo conversation happens that you aren't expecting or whatever, like this stuff really does make a difference and matters.
Yeah, it does. And we can get better, we can
like it's a skill.
Never about perfection, but we can build the skills.
Yeah.
That's good. Thanks, Rebecca. That's really good.
I think the thing that I'll probably take away is maybe, I think we were talking about it last week, maybe the week before. But the whole, whatever conversation we're having about like what is and what is not allowed in faith and all that. And then at some point, whatever verse it is that talks about like working out your salvation with fear and trembling, the way I understood it forever was be afraid because you're certainly going to hell if you're not working hard enough. But I think it was reframed for me in whatever week that was to be like, you know, like it's an overused phrase, but like holding the tension and holding the unknown and being okay with that. And like, you know, taking that, I don't know, that next step, whatever that may be. And if it's fearful and nervous and whatever, it's still a step in growth. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, and I guess to go back to like what Todd was saying about like just letting wonder be there. So like wonder with people, and then also wonder with, you know, wonder how this whole idea of faith can include, or like what, you know, I don't know. It's not eloquent.
It's good though.
Yeah, like, yeah, I don't know, just like wondering what else, what more, like, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. That's good. Wondering what else, wondering what more. I think if those words can lead us in conversations and theology, and they're just so much more expansive, you know, wondering what else, wondering what more. Yeah.
Yeah. An easy, an analogy, I guess, or I don't know. I also lost the right word. In one of the schools that I worked in, we had this whole arts training where, like when you're looking at a piece of art, you say like, okay, what's going on in this picture? What do you see that makes you say that? And what more can we find? And I think bringing those questions to people and faith, I think is like, at least it's, I want to say it's maybe helpful.
Can you repeat those three?
Yeah. So you first say, what's happening in this picture, or what's going on? What do you see that makes you say that? And what more can we find?
I'm writing it down.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just from like an art perspective, it was like, oh, this makes things accessible. And I would assume that would probably spill over to other areas as well.
Well, I just even think like those are three great questions when you're reading the Bible. You know what I mean?
Right.
Totally. That's beautiful. Woo.
I don't know. I'll just say one last thing. I'm talking a little bit too much, but so this is what can happen, at least in a lot of ways. So let this be a picture. So today I'm down in Robbinsdale, and I go to Hy-Vee there to meet a buddy, and I love potato salad. Well, I go up there and they have potato salad. I want to order some. Problem is they had 3 potato salads. I'm like, oh man, which one do I go with? So it was the guy on the other side. The guy was working there, and he didn't smile, whatever. And I go, hey bud, which one's good? And the way he looked at me, and it was like, I felt like I was annoying him by asking, like, what do you just pick one, Mac. I mean, what can I tell you? It was kind of the look I got. And I was a little underneath. I'm like, well, gee, why are you even working back there? You know, I mean, if you're going to meet people, don't you? You know, that's how that was the dialogue I was having with him inside. And then I said, well, he says, well, which one whatever you think. And I said, well, it has, if one of these tastes like what my grandmother used to make, Ma made the greatest potato salad. And if I knew which one tastes like Ma's, that's the one I want. Well, when I said that, and this was all in like 20 seconds, he started talking to me about his grandmother and his great grandmother and he grew up down south, and they were sharecroppers, I guess. Anyway, oh my gosh, in the course of 20 seconds, I'm learning about this guy and what his life must have been like. And anyway, he was talking about how wonderful his parents were. And this was all pretty fast, but it started with me saying, "You jerk," inside. Just, what do you mean, what kind of potato salad? Because I assumed how his looked, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I was so wrong. And then by the end, he's like, "Well, hey, let's try it." He takes a spoon. He's giving me all three, and anyway, it was a nice conversation. I couldn't have been more wrong.
That's
and
great.
if I can learn that over potato salad, who knows what I can learn with people if you just can hang in there.
That's really great. What a great story, Jim. Thanks for that.
It took me longer to tell it than it actually happened, but it was
That's great.
it made my day.
That's awesome. Anyone else? Any last things?
I just keep reminding myself about, I think, Andrew, you were kind of talking about it too, but when Will talked about how let's try not to hold our things in and be loose. And I keep reminding myself when I'm talking to other people that it's not my job to pry their hands open. Yeah. It's just to be there and ask them what kind of potato salad I should get, right? Yeah. So, because it's easy to try and pry somebody else's hands open and find out what's in there. I want to know what's in your hand, but it's not what we need to do. And I don't think this is true, but I was talking to Fimarin, and we had told them that we had a meeting and you're going to stay in your room. And he's like, "Well, what's your meeting about?" And I was like, "Well, it's about helping us remember to make sure that everybody's always welcome, no matter what." And he kind of chuckled and said, "You guys are really good at that. You don't need to do that." And I was like, "Oh, buddy, it's so much farther than that." But that was kind of cool.
I love that.
And I feel like we try really hard to always ask the person what kind of potato salad to get, Jim.
Yeah.
There's just always, there's something there.
I see that in Joan too.
Joan too.
Yep.
So.
What a cool thing. How old is you? This was your son?
Yeah.
How old is he?
He's 7.
Wow.
Okay, and 2 hours before that, he was like, "You always have meetings at church."
The yin and the yang. Yeah.
Don't ride it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just.
Yeah, but
It'll come and go. Anyone else have any last things? I love it. So great.
I think that I am just feeling very, I don't know if challenged is the right word, but I feel like in the relationships that I have that are blood relationships that are not chosen but are given, I am struggling the most with these.
Welcome to humanity.
Yeah. And so I want to see the other in every other person, but in my family, I'm just done. So I'm really struggling every week. I'm like, I still am left wanting to control these conversations, and I cannot. And I still am left with I don't know how to continue to engage kindly. But I'm willing.
I think that is, well, I don't want to be cliche, but being willing is the most of the game, and other people need to be willing, and you can't control that, but you can control you most of the time. Thanks, Michelle. Well, it's 8:30. Any last thoughts? Well, this has been thoroughly enjoyable for me, especially this week. Was really rich. So thank you for that. Thanks for being involved in a great conversation. And I agree with Steve. It's like, you know, we just get to the point where we're comfortable and then, okay, that's it. So, I mean, the open invitation for anyone to start something, you know, think about that. But appreciate you guys and have a great rest of the week. And yeah, we'll see you next time.